The Chiefs spent $187 million in the trenches over the last week. Was it the right move? Dustin Poirier changes the game on retirement in MMA, and it's still, the second half still sucks to be a baseball fan in the state of Missouri so far in Major League Baseball. All that and more here on the Pop Short Nose podcast today on this wonderful Monday. And I'm looking forward to getting into this discussion really with the Chiefs. We're going to start with that and kind of work our way down this list. So if you are enjoying the content, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Have plenty more film breakdowns coming your way. Hit that bell to stay notified when I post anything or when I go live. Felt good about the live over the weekend. Did that again like in the middle of the prelims. Heading into the main card, kind of previewing the main card, which I was completely wrong about that. We'll get to that on so many levels, whether it was win-loss or whether the fight was going to be entertaining or not. It was kind of a snoozer past the prelims after especially so many finishes. It really just felt like that was going to carry on. But anyways, we'll get into that. But yeah, hit that subscribe button for me. You're still on the road to 500. I'm trying to hit that before the NFL season starts. I plan on the next film breakdowns being Rashee Rice, as he's been in the news. We got a little bit to talk about with him. And let's see, Xavier Worthy. So we're going to go receivers in the next couple. And so let's get straight into this podcast and start talking about this Chiefs football team. And we will start with Trey Smith and George Karlaftis. Breaking on Sunday, George Karlaftis signs a $93 million deal. An extension will keep him in Kansas City for 4 more years. Of course, Trey Smith also signed a 4-year deal worth $94 million. That makes Trey Smith the highest paid right guard in the league at the current moment, at least APY-wise. Total value, Lindstrom had a $102.5 million deal, $100 million deal for Robert Hunt of the Panthers. But that equals out to $20 million APY. Total guaranteed, Trey Smith is going to be a rich man. $70 million guaranteed in this contract. He will be an unrestricted free agent in 2029. That puts him at 23.5 APY, which that's going to put George Karlaftis right about at the same spot, and we'll talk about that in a minute, because I do think that both deals were super necessary. And I've seen some discourse about the George Karlaftis one, but staying with this Trey Smith one, obviously Joe Thuney trade was to essentially give the wiggle room to make this deal happen with Trey Smith. And, if you've been following along on the channel, the podcast, wherever, I did a Kingsley Suamataia film breakdown, and I do think that it's worth a shot, at least, to see what Suamataia has at left guard to replace Joe Thuney. Obviously, he's not going to be on the level of Joe Thuney, but when we are talking about, or at least not immediately, he could be at some point, but when we are talking about pass protection, it is the tackles. That's been the issue for the Kansas City Chiefs over the last few years, and that's going to be your guys that are protecting the pocket, essentially, right? Obviously, you need protection up the middle. You have one of the best centers in the NFL. You have one of the best right guards in the NFL. Maybe the top 2 at their position currently. In Creed Humphrey, I absolutely believe Creed Humphrey is the best center in the league. And then you also have Trey Smith, who, he's right there. He may be the best right guard in the league. Then you look at left guard, and you had Joe Thuney, who was another one that was one of the best in the league at his position. So that core that they had together, I think they keep for the most part, obviously with Creed and Trey Smith. And now at left guard, you're trying out a second-year guy, see where it goes. Really have nothing to lose, I don't think, with Kingsley Suamataia. Obviously, you burnt a second-round pick on what was going to be a left tackle, but I think that's null and void now with going out and getting Josh Simmons. They also signed Jaylon Moore, who I also did a film breakdown on. That was the first offseason player film breakdown that I did, was Jaylon Moore. So I've done the left side of the line already, depending on, and me and EDJ have talked about this, of who's going to start. Is it going to be Jaylon Moore? Is it going to be Josh Simmons? Obviously, if Josh Simmons is healthy, I think you would expect him to at least at some point be pushed into the role, right? I don't know if it's like his to start out with, and we'll see. Training camp starts this week, which is awesome. We are that much closer and that close to football season. So I think with the offensive line, I do really think that this is all good moves that they have made. I think that, you have put in left tackle in a bad position for years now, it feels like. Obviously, the Orlando Brown deal didn't work out. They wanted to move him to right tackle. He didn't want to go to right tackle. He wants the left tackle money. Okay, go to Cincinnati. And then you had, obviously, the filler of, I'm not going to be able to remember his name off the top of my head, but, man, that's going to bug me too, not remembering. But the guy that had played for the Buccaneers, he came over to the Chiefs and was solid for a year. Obviously, the tackles weren't in a great position. That was Jawan Taylor's first season with that offensive line. So left tackle has kind of been the position the Chiefs have just been like, we'll figure it out. And that's not a position you can have that attitude on. And I think they finally realized that, which they were in the spot where I think that had to be the position where Jawan Taylor obviously was not going to be, I'll say ready. I don't want to just say not good enough to play left tackle, but not ready to play left tackle. Probably not going to be ready at any point in his career to play left tackle. But having him over at right tackle, he's been solid. And I know, a lot of the outcry and the fan outrage of, the penalties and things like that. But at the end of the day, Jawan Taylor has shown up in the postseason, and that is where it matters. So I don't have a problem with Jawan Taylor as much. It's frustrating. I get it. The penalties, they suck. And, it is what it is. But hey, when it's go time, when it's January, when it's February, Jawan Taylor does his job. And obviously, nobody did their job very well against the Eagles in the Super Bowl, but that is part of the problem of, they just have been winging it at left tackle for years now, it feels like. I think really ever since that Eric Fisher has been out the door, I think the Chiefs have pretty much winged it at left tackle. And that's not good enough at this point. So them going out and getting a guy that, they're paying, I think, around $17 million a year in Jaylon Moore, which they probably paid too much for a backup if that's what this is. But it's only 2 years. It gives Jaylon Moore a chance to continue in kind of his role where he's been. Obviously, he's been the backup to, now I'm not going to remember Buddy's name over in San Francisco, but I keep wanting to say Trey Smith now. But he's been a backup already over there, which he got to fill in quite a bit last year. Was able to, I was able to get enough tape on him to do a film breakdown from last season, in games. And, he started against the Kansas City Chiefs. So I think that this year for the Chiefs, they have made left tackle a priority, which is where they have needed to be for quite some time. And they're finally able to do it. I think part of that was the Tooney deal. Getting Tooney gone to Chicago, it does suck. I mean, I love Joe Tooney. I think he's a great left guard. But, you got to think about the age. You got to think about the money and, where they're going to put that. They pretty much replaced him with Jaylon Moore, having him over at left tackle. So either way, one, you don't have any pressure on your rookie. If he can't start, he does not need to. He just needs to get better, continue to get better, rehab that knee, which he's ahead of schedule already. We've heard multiple times. We're really going to see at camp coming up starting this week and where he's at, where he fits in with Andy Heck and what he wants out of this offensive line this season. And you also have, well, not also, but just saying that you have flexibility. You have depth at left tackle, which they have not had. The Kansas City Chiefs have not had depth at the left tackle position in a long time. So I do think that they went out and attacked this properly, and I think that this team is much better than they were last year altogether, already at this point. So Trey Smith, his signing, absolutely terrific. Obviously, you're not going to have to worry about Josh Simmons for 4 years. If he does become like an elite left tackle, you don't have to worry about it. But he has the time to develop into an elite left tackle, and that's what the Kansas City Chiefs needed. So I think this offensive line is in great shape. I think this offensive line is in the best shape it's been in since, I don't know, Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz, on both sides at tackle. I think, honestly, this is the best I've seen this offensive line look, or at least the best I feel about it going into a season since, hell, maybe I was a kid in the mid-2000s when you had Willie Roaf, Will Shields, Brian Waters, Casey Wigman, those kind of guys at that level, which... Now, don't take this as me comparing and saying this offensive line is going to be as good as that offensive line. I'm not saying that at all. But this is the best I've felt about this offensive line since then. So it just goes to show, I feel like it is hard to put together a full, 1 through 5 comprehensive offensive line in this league. I think the Chiefs have done their best to do that. I think the left tackle position is finally feels like it's shored up. So we will see. I think taking a chance on Kingsley Suamataia at left guard is absolutely fine, and I'm excited to see what the Chiefs are going to do, with this offensive line this season. So to move to the other side of the line, let's talk about George Karlaftis and his brand new deal. So I wanted to share the screen of just league-wide edge rushers and what they're getting paid, just to kind of give an idea of where everybody's out. Obviously, this hasn't been updated. I'm recording this Sunday evening after the deal has been made. I don't think that we will see this updated until tomorrow, more than likely, on Over the Cap. Well, by the way, shout out to Over the Cap. This is like the greatest website of all time when you want to get real nerdy about stuff like this. And really look and see where some of these guys are at and what they're getting paid and kind of what to expect out of, whatever, whoever's getting paid next, right? Because we still have to talk about Trent McDuffie. We still have to talk about Leo Chanel, two guys that I would like to see the Chiefs re-sign. Obviously, Trent McDuffie is the guy that you really want to see the Chiefs re-sign, but I think Leo Chanel is sneaky in the fact that, I just wonder how he's going to be viewed. But anyways, let's get to Karlaftis. Where he's going to fit in on this is right about at 10th. His new deal, $93 million for 4 years. That's going to work out to about 23.25 APY. And so per year-wise, that's going to put him right above Van Ginkel and right under Rashawn Gary, which, I think this works for both sides. I really do. And especially, if the cap just keeps going up, these guys are going to keep getting paid more. I mean, we just saw TJ Watt get a big deal. You look at him at the top of this list, he's making $41 million APY, which is almost double what George Karlaftis is going to make on his contract. $108 million fully guaranteed. $108 million guaranteed, 41 per year. $123 million deal. That's most of his contract that is guaranteed. And that is over, it doesn't say how many years on this. I don't believe I don't see. Let's go to TJ Watt and just look at this deal. That is just over 4 years, which that's kind of crazy. You look at that cap number, $23.3 million on the cap. Then it goes 42, 42, 46. That TJ Watt is making. So that's just the idea I want to give behind this, because you look, this is not a bad deal whatsoever. And I think that George Karlaftis, a lot of people, are, I guess, unsure because I've seen discourse that, some people didn't feel like it was a great move, which I thought it was. I thought that was a really good move by the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that he's another one that's sneaky. It's like Leo Chanel, like I'm talking about, he is very sneaky, where as a quarterback hits, there was only 2 other guys in front of him. Let me slow down for a second. Trey Hendrickson was one of those guys that was in front of him. I'm trying to look, because he hasn't got a new deal yet. And I don't see, yeah, there he is. That would put him right in front of him by a couple of spots. So, and understandable that Trey Hendrickson is one of the best edge rushers in the league. I think that he's, maybe top 5 in the league right now based off of last season. And, like I said, George Karlaftis, that was one of the only guys that had more quarterback hits than Karlaftis. So I do think that this Karlaftis deal, I think that he has sneakily gotten better and better. Every year he improves. Pretty good against the run. pretty decent pass rusher. I mean, I think that he's more of a rotational, or not rotational piece, but I mean, he's not going to get the kind of pressure all the time to produce the sacks, right? And the sexy statistics that I think a lot of fans want to see and front offices would like to see, but I think that's why he's just perfect. And I feel like the Chiefs kind of find these guys all the time, where it seems like Leo Chanel is another one where he is such a good fit for this defense and what he does for the Chiefs that might not be able to be replicated on another team in another system. Steve Spagnuolo just knows how to get the best out of his talent, which, okay, maybe I lied a little bit. This is just for 2024, but his run grade isn't great. It has improved drastically. And I'm going off of PFF right now. Pass rush grade, 45th out of all D tackles or defensive ends. Let me pop this over here so you guys can see that as my screen goes haywire. Give you an idea of what I'm looking at here. Pass rush grade, 69.5 last year. That's 45th out of 211 edge rushers. 68.4 grade overall, which is 63rd out of 211 pass rushers. 22 solo tackles, 8 sacks, 5 assists. I think that like what he does during the game, 61 total pressures, that's 13th. Hits was first PFF has at 21 hits. 26th in hurries with 32. Obviously, he doesn't get the sacks, but third in batted passes, and he had 4 of them. And that is one thing that George Karlaftis, and if you watch any of my film breakdowns defensive-wise, that I talk about this quite a bit because it does seem like the Chiefs bat the most balls at the line out of any other team. And obviously I watch more Chiefs football than anyone else, but I don't feel like I see a team as good as the Kansas City Chiefs at batting the ball at the line. If they get close to the quarterback, they're going to make a play. They're going to make sure that you don't make something happen is what it feels like more often than not. Whereas I think there's so much value in that. And this is part of why this defense has been so good. Again, maybe it's not like the sexy stats that everybody wants to see, the sacks, they're getting the pressures. They are hurrying the quarterback. But also, there's no guy that's necessarily dominating outside of Chris Jones at the D tackle position, which, again, we're looking at edge rushers. You want to see guys like Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, all of these guys like that, whereas the Chiefs just kind of have a rotational, look at the edge rushers. I did like the Ashton Gelati draft pick, and we'll see how he ends up turning out. But I do think that this is important to get this deal with Karlaftis. I also think that it kind of shows probably, we'll see where FAU fits in, but, FAU outside of being a real rotational piece for anybody, maybe he ends up in Kansas City for a couple of more years. They get him for, something cheap for a couple of years, kind of give him a prove-it deal. But he has not really panned out the way you'd like to see, although he's not been terrible, I don't think, personally. I don't think that he's gotten a ton of time to shine necessarily, but I think George Karlaftis is really kind of like the leader of that rotation, pretty much. And the work he's done with Tamba Ali, and I've seen multiple pictures of him doing jiu-jitsu with Tamba Ali, and Tamba Ali is really taking him under his wing, and almost is like the spiritual successor to Tamba Ali in my mind. I think that he plays somewhat similar-ish to Tamba Ali and just kind of gives that vibe, just the quiet guy that can come in and when he really turns it on can absolutely wreck a play, wreck a drive. So I do think the George Karlaftis deal was absolutely great. He gets better every season, and he has so far, and now he gets paid like it, and he's a top 10 paid guy, but he's number 10. So I think it also really helps the Kansas City Chiefs. And if he continues to improve, because I did see where, some people were saying this is a gamble, of what they're doing with Karlaftis, which I don't think it is. I don't think that it's that much of a gamble because of how impactful he has been on this defense. It feels like he makes so many plays. I mean, look at the, was it 4th down in the AFC Championship game? Karlaftis was the guy that got the pressure to force the errant throw by Josh Allen that ended the game, essentially. So Karlaftis has immense value in this defense. I don't know if he has as much value in other defenses. Maybe it's kind of like the L'Jarius Sneed, where, it's like Sneed went to Tennessee, which awful team where he went, and hasn't been as impactful as he was in Kansas City. I mean, that last year in Kansas City a couple of years ago, you could not tell me L'Jarius Sneed was not the best corner in the league. From the locking down Jamar Chase to the peanut punch at the end zone on Zay Flowers in the AFC Championship game. I mean, that was a play that saved that game for the Kansas City Chiefs. Really gave them all the momentum at that point in the game in a low-scoring and very defensive-driven football game. So I do think that this is a good deal. I think the Chiefs, again, $187 million, nothing to sneeze at over the last, 5-6 days-ish? Because what day was the Trey Smith news? I think maybe Wednesday. And then now on Sunday we get the news that George Karlaftis has been re-signed for 4 more years. So let me know in the comments below what you think about each deal, and which one was better. Do you think the Karlaftis deal is a gamble? I thought that was an interesting point that somebody made that I don't agree with, but I'd be interested to hear what you guys think about that in the comments below and where the Chiefs are headed this season. So with that being said, as this podcast is going to be focused mainly on the Chiefs, we're going to talk about this UFC card, UFC 318, over the weekend. But last but not least that I want to get to, I did say, and I might talk about this, I don't know, we'll see where I go with this on the film breakdown, but Rashee Rice is my next one up on the film breakdown, so make sure you subscribe for that. Hit the bell to stay notified. I'm not sure exactly what day I'm going to drop it, but it will be one day this week, this upcoming week, the Rashee Rice film breakdown, so be on the lookout for that. But obviously Rashee Rice was in the news this week as he finally got sentenced. He got sentenced to 5 years probation, 30 days in jail for his actions, of course, last offseason in the high-speed race or, whatever happened with that. And so just wanted to talk about that for a minute just because I'm interested to see where this goes, what kind of suspension he gets, basically. And so saying that, I shout out to EDJ. He's not here this week, but we've definitely been talking and texting back and forth because we texted about this the moment it broke, pretty much. And so with Rashee Rice, I don't know, because initially EDJ thought he might get a full season, which I didn't think so. I said 6 to 8 games right out of the gate that I thought may, incur. But I've also seen, shout out to Matt Derrick, who covers the Chiefs. I did see him say he expects 1 to 2 games. And I could see that. I mean, at the end of the day, say what you will. Say what you will about the Chiefs players, all that kind of stuff. But I will say that I do think, how am I trying to put this? Nobody was hurt, as far as we know, in the wreck or anything like that. Obviously, he fled the scene. Nothing, not trying to cape for Rashee Rice in this situation, but when you look at a lot of the other things that happened, I mean, look at Von Miller a couple of years ago. That his domestic dispute. It took, I think, 1.5 years to get him suspended off of that or whatever it was, and I think it was just a couple of games, which, don't take anything I say as law right now just because I'm kind of going off of memory and whatnot. But, I just don't think that this was... Let me figure out how to put this exactly. I don't think that it was that kind of... It wasn't the Henry Ruggs. Obviously, Henry Ruggs... there was a death involved with the Henry Ruggs situation. I just don't think that we're going to see a super long suspension from Rashee Rice. And I'm very, very excited to see what Rashee Rice can do on the field this year. I'm excited to do this film breakdown. But, at the end of the day, and this is kind of like my line of thinking because, maybe you think I'm a crazy person and just is caping for, my favorite team, the Chiefs. But I will say to this is that you got to think about, you got a lot of young men that haven't seen a lot of money in their life, and they're all of a sudden making millions upon millions of dollars. And these are like 21, 22-year-old kids. And personally, I think I was an idiot at 21 years old. I couldn't imagine if I would have been a rich idiot. All of a sudden came into millions of dollars. And I feel like, I guess this is my thought process, and to kind of like put out there in the world, right? Is think about that. Just think about being young and dumb and all of a sudden being handed a check for, whatever it may be, $4 or $5 million. I think I just saw Patrick Mahomes on this day, how many ever years ago, signed his rookie deal that was worth, it had like $11 million signing bonus, $16 million altogether, 16.4 or something like that. So imagine if you got handed basically $30 million in front of you as a child, really. I mean, say what you will. Obviously, you're an adult at 18, but basically a child still. I mean, you're still just not developed that way. I mean, some people are and some people aren't. Some people take longer to mature and get into that adulthood. Some people, do it a lot quicker. So that's all I'm saying is I think that this whole situation boils down to, you had a kid doing a dumb thing and put other people in trouble, put other people at risk. I do think that he deserves a suspension for it. Obviously, the code of ethics, he deserves, whatever the, punishment ended up being, which I don't think was too bad, and, probably about right on point. Although, I don't want to get into probation, but that's another whole nother story. But 5 years probation, 30 days in jail. It was what it was. Like I said, no one got severely hurt. Nobody got killed in the situation, but it was something very stupid to do. Shouldn't have happened. And hopefully he learned from it. Hopefully Rashee Rice learned from that situation, did a dumb thing and learned from it. And I think that all of us, just really as humans, I don't want to get too far on that, but just my thought process is kind of what I'm going through. But just us as humans, when we make mistakes, we want to get better. We want to learn from it, whether it's in a sport, in our job, what we do, personal relationships, your friends, your significant others, all that kind of stuff. I feel like it's just kind of the way that I come at it and like view it is really kind of what I'm trying to kind of get on my thought process on this. But yeah, we'll see what the suspension comes to. I think that Matt Derrick is probably right, maybe 1 to 2 games. I'm trying to find where he tweeted about this for you guys, just to show you what Matt Derrick had to say, because I thought it was interesting. Because I kind of initially thought maybe 6 to 8 games would be what the NFL hands out. I cannot find this tweet to save my life, but it looks like there's another tweet. This is from, looks like Friday. Rashee Rice expected to receive a 2 to 4 game suspension. Okay, this is per Matt Derrick. Okay, 2 to 4 game suspension. So maybe it was 2 to 4. Maybe he thought that it would be appealed to go down to 1 or 2 games. Rashee Rice expected to receive a 2 to 4 game suspension per chief sources to Matt Derrick. He's not expected to appeal and will serve whatever punishment the league hands down. As part of his probation deal, Rice will also serve 30 days in jail over the next 5 years. So he does have the ability to go and serve his time whenever he would like to, essentially. Once that's completed and all terms are met, the charges will be formally dropped. A trial has been set for early 2026, which would have allowed Rice to play through the 2025 season, but he chose to resolve the case early and put it in the rear view. The NFL hasn't made anything official yet, but with the legal process now wrapped up, it's expected the league's investigation to close soon. So I do think it's like somewhat admirable, and maybe like going back to, hopefully he learned from this. He just wants to put it behind him, because the first thing I thought when I saw this was the fact that he was supposed to have his trial at some point. And here it is. But he was supposed to have his trial at some point in 2026. So I thought he was going to get through the season and then, we would see the fallout to it all. But, I think that it's a, good idea. Just try to put it behind you and get it figured out. Get it figured out for, with the league, what kind of suspension you will see. So I'm sure at whatever point the hardest stretches for the Chiefs, he'll be slapped with a 4-game suspension, as it seems like that's how it's gone. Whether non-Chiefs fans want to believe that or not, I mean, that's just really been the reality. If you look back at a few years ago with Willie Gay in the situation where it was like, it was a DV case, but he broke a vacuum is what he did, because it's baby mama drama. Broke her vacuum, essentially, over in Overland Park. And then he got handed out, I think it was a 2 or 4 game suspension right before the toughest stretch of the season. It was one of the Bills' losses from the regular season a couple of years ago. Either way, stuff happens. So it is what it is. And I think Rashee Rice is going to be primed to have a really good season outside of 2 to 4 games, I think. And so, like I said, film breakdown will be coming on Rashee Rice. After that, it's going to be film breakdown on Xavier Worthy in the next 2. If you want to see anyone in particular on these player film breakdowns, put them down there in the comments for me, and let me know who you want to see in those film breakdowns. So that pretty much wraps it up with Kansas City Chiefs news. On next is UFC 318 over the weekend. So I'm going to keep this about the main card. If you do want to hear me talk about the prelims, I did kind of talk about, the crazy finishes at the end of the day, really in the live stream I did on Saturday night. So if you want to go check that out, I will link that in the description if you want to hear me talk about the prelims, essentially. Because at the time I was on the air, we had Fight of the Night middleweight bout happening that I really wasn't able to talk about too much, and I still need to go back and watch, actually. Just because I was live while that was happening, and I had like a million things in front of me, it felt like. I went live over on TikTok also for the first time, so it's kind of trying to figure that out also while I was live on YouTube. And, then I had the fight on the other side that I just did not pay attention to much. So, but it did win Fight of the Night. And then just to kind of like show you the prelims real quick, I mean, 1, 2, 3... 4, 5, 6 first round finishes in a row to kick the card off. And then we got decision to death after that. We didn't have a single other finish on this card. So let's start with one of the most beautiful nights of fighting I've seen in a long time, just for what happened in the main event and, after the main event and all that stuff. I mean, it was just an amazing send-off for Dustin Poirier. But to start off with it, Michael Johnson versus Daniel Zellhuber. I felt like an idiot for picking Zellhuber actually going into the fight, because I thought, it's the Missouri boy and Michael Johnson. How could I not go with him? And I thought the age was going to catch up to him. The funniest thing of the whole night in my mind was Zellhuber goes to his corner after round 1, and the first thing or the main thing that I remember him saying, he's fast. And, the way he said it sounded defeating. I don't think he planned for really what he was in for with Michael Johnson. Because Michael Johnson, pushing 40 at 39 years old, is still extremely fast. And his hand speed was, top level. So Michael Johnson gets an amazing win. Really fought well. He's a plus 275 dog. At one point, I think they said he was a plus 500 dog, biggest underdog on the entire card. And I thought it was a good fight. It was a fun fight to watch. And like I said, it really reminded me of that Cowboy fight where he fought, I wish I could remember Buddy's name, Alex something. I almost want to say Alex Herrera, Alex, I don't know. If you know the fight that I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. But, yeah, dude, I thought that it was a really good fight for Michael Johnson. It was exciting to see him get back in the win column, and I don't know what the future holds for his career, but the fact that the dude is 40 and still winning against, this young competition, I mean, gatekeeper at 155, which at this point in his career, I don't think is an insult. So, shout out to Michael Johnson for getting the dub. One that I actually got right, halfly, because I picked Patricio Pitbull to win this fight, but I also predicted it to be a very exciting fight. You had Dan Ige, you had Patricio Pitbull in this fight. Dan Ige, I mean, that's a scrapper right there. You know, it seems like every fight you see him in, he is out there putting on a show. And so I thought we were going to see a great fight. Patricio Pitbull, dude, I mean, it's like he's stuck in the mud. It's the same thing as like the Patchy Mix fight that we watched. And the same fight of, you know, Pitbull and Yair. And I just accounted that to, you know, Yair is at the top level in the UFC at the moment. I mean, this is a guy that is challenged for the belt recently. I mean, he's at his apex at the moment where, you know, and the way we saw Yair Rodriguez coming into the UFC was, okay, this is an outstanding prospect that is just going to get better and, you know, one day is going to challenge for the belt, maybe be a world champion, maybe be a long-time world champion. You know, like that is how he was seen coming in. So, you know, and to see him at his top level beat up on Patricio Pitbull, I thought, okay, well, maybe he just didn't know what to expect with Yair, got beat up in that fight, wasn't able to really implement his game plan, and then we saw him what felt like stare at Dan Ige for 15 minutes on Saturday night. So I don't know what going back to the drawing board for Patricio Pitbull is to get to, you know, try to get to that next level, because he did mention on Friday, or maybe it was Thursday, whenever the press conference was, that he does want to fight for a belt. And this is not a guy that looks like that can get to a title shot, let alone, you know, winning a belt or in the UFC. So, I mean, I don't see him competing with Volkanovski right now. Obviously, he just lost to Yair. This performance wasn't any better. So maybe in his third performance, whoever they put him against, Danny Ige is ranked number 11. So, you know, somebody else in that mix, I think like a lower top 10 guy would be maybe acceptable to give Patricio Pitbull. But, you know, I also wouldn't want to see the UFC necessarily put, you know, like a top 5 guy in front of him, because, I mean, what do you do if Patricio comes out and absolutely just gets steamrolled or something like that? I mean, what do you, like, how much does that help that guy that's at the top 5? Maybe like a Diego Lopez coming off the title loss or something like that. And what does that do for Pitbull? I mean, you know, it doesn't look good for him at all. So I feel like giving him somebody that is still somewhere in the same realm as Dan Ige would probably be your best bet in that situation. Kevin Holland versus Daniel Rodriguez was the next fight. This one I was also half right about. I picked Kevin Holland to win. I also said that this fight is going to be a banger, and it absolutely was. They delivered. Kevin Holland and Daniel Rodriguez absolutely delivered. After the fight, Kevin Holland went over to Dana White and said, "I'm sorry," or "my bad," or whatever it was that John Anik said that Kevin Holland told him. And, hey, man, you know, you win some, you lose some. And we've seen Kevin Holland in both lights in the UFC, and he came out there and put on a show either way. I talked about this on Saturday night, but Kevin Holland has talked about how he wants to become a contender. He wants to challenge for a belt. I don't know if at this point, Kevin Holland can, actually do that, but, we have seen him, fight very well in his last few fights, and, to see him come back against D-Rod the way he did was absolutely wonderful. He didn't do enough to win a decision, but the back and forth, man, that was one hell of a fight, and I'm kind of surprised that they didn't win fight of the night. Like I said, I didn't really catch much of the Vettori Allen fight, but I was surprised that Kevin Holland, Daniel Rodriguez, or even the main event didn't get, because I think that they definitely could have won fight of the night. And, Dustin's retiring. It's Max Holloway, fan favorite. We all love Max. We all love Dustin Poirier. They went out there and had the exact fight that we thought they were going to have. More into that in just a moment. But, co-main event of the night, Paulo Costa versus Roman Kopylov. This fight went about exactly as I thought it would, and I can't believe that Kopylov was a minus 245 favorite in this going into the fight, and plus 200 for Costa as a dog, because Paulo Costa ran right through him. And honestly, with Kopylov's style, I kind of expected that. I mean, there was the chance that Costa wouldn't look, as good as he did, and he would look like the Paulo Costa we've seen show up in his last couple of fights, but I just felt like I did some research on Kopylov this last week and watched a few of his fights, And I just thought, boy, this is the perfect opportunity for Paulo Costa to be aggressive and just be first to the punch and beat this guy and maybe get a finish. He didn't get a finish. It was a unanimous decision, but, I mean, for 15 minutes, Paulo Costa was first, and Paulo Costa was hitting Kopylov what felt like left and right. I mean, Kopylov really could not do much in the fight, but I just feel like that tentative style he's got does not work at this level. You cannot go in against the highest level fighters and fight timid. And, I get it. He's a counter striker. He looks for the counter, and that's fine, but you have to find a way to incorporate some aggressive tactics as well as being a counter striker. You got to, continue to get better and put it all together. You got to put the counter striking with, to figure out how to be aggressive sometimes. I feel like I totally get that, but, wanting to be a counter striker, you want to see what's coming in and react to it and then build your offense off of that, but it doesn't work like that all the time. And at the highest level, it's not going to work like that. If you let somebody be first all night, you are not going to win at this level. I do not believe that you can win at this level and let somebody else be, the lead to your, the lead of your dancing partner, basically. They are leading you at that point. So I think Kopylov really needs to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to work on being more aggressive in the future, in his future fights. I'll be interested to see him come back from this fight, but I don't know. It's a dude that I just kind of really picked that up on watching some of his last few fights, and I feel like Paulo Costa was that was a mismatch for him in that regard. And, we always talk about styles make fights, and that's exactly what I said on Saturday night when I was picking Paulo Costa to win this fight. That styles make fights, and the way Paulo Costa's style lines up with Roman Kopylov's style, I don't think that it goes well for Kopylov, and it didn't. Main event of the evening, last but not least, Dustin the Diamond Poirier steps into the octagon for the last time, makes his final walk to the octagon. It was absolutely awesome. Made the walk with Lil Wayne, had a competitive fight with Max Holloway, steps in to try to capture that BMF belt from Max Holloway that he, of course, beat Justin Gaethje for. Tough night for Dustin Poirier. He had his moments late in the second round. Obviously, he rocked Max, but, Max came out, and, it was absolutely beautiful what he did right out of the gate. He kind of slapped his hand away. Boom, right hand right over the top. Drop Poirier, and we got to talk about Max Holloway and how good he looks at 155 pounds now that he is like fully into 155 pounds. He's not cutting that weight. He's been able to probably put on some weight. He looked like the bigger fighter, which is crazy to think, just of how almost like skin and bones Max has always looked in the UFC, and he's carrying power, which I don't think that we've really seen from Max. It was like in the second fight between Poirier and Holloway at 155 pounds for the interim belt, what we saw was every time Poirier hit Max Holloway, it was devastating, versus Holloway landing a lot of stuff that just didn't really affect Poirier the same way that his strikes affected Max. We saw that even out on Saturday night, where I feel like Max Holloway had some strikes that really hurt Poirier. We saw it in the first round. We saw it in the second round. And then he was able to keep him at bay. The fifth round, and it might have been happening before, but I realized this kind of live watching it. I want to go back and rewatch it all together, and I might have a fight breakdown on this fight, or maybe a couple of these coming up on the channel, because I do want to get into kind of like the analytical side of fighting. Like I've been doing with the football film breakdowns. I'd like to do that for fighting because, look, hey, this is my area of expertise personally. I've trained martial arts most of my life. More than half my life now at this point. And so this is something that I get on that level, right? Whereas football, I feel like I'm catching up. I'm trying to be good at, really the analytical approach to the game, but it's like learning everything, learning the terminology and, whatever. I feel like sometimes I sound dumb, but hey, man, you guys support it and are enjoying it. So I'm just happy to give that content and, make that content and put that out there. But, this is my realm of expertise. So I'm done with that tangent. But the kicks the body kicks that Max Holloway was landing on Dustin Poirier, he was hurt. I feel like he was visibly hurt in the 5th round, and it felt like every time that Poirier was getting ready to start up, getting ready to, maybe start to try to throw something together, found the window, found where he wants to go, Max hit him with a rear roundhouse body kick that, the last one he landed of that round, maybe a couple minutes left, I can't remember off the top of my head, that just made a slap thud noise that echoed through the arena, or at least on the broadcast it did. I guess I wasn't there, I don't know. But it felt like it echoed through the arena. I feel like absolutely stopped Dustin Poirier in his tracks and kept him at bay from really throwing any good combos in that last round. And Max was just very strategic about it. It felt like he said, hey, I rocked him in the first, I rocked him in the second, I've dropped him in this fight. I've also been rocked. Max was rocked in the fight in the second round. And now we need to really just go in here and technically beat Dustin Poirier, which is what he absolutely did. So, absolutely wonderful fight. Hats off to Max Holloway for getting the dub out there on Saturday night in New Orleans. But what's up next for Max Holloway? Let me know in the comments below what you think is up for Max Holloway, because I'm very interested in this. Because one side, Charles Oliveira for the BMF belt sounds like a good idea. But I also like the thought of seeing him at 155 pounds against Ilia Topuria. I really do. We saw them at 145 pounds, and Max was, he was in the fight, but Topuria obviously was too much for him at 145 pounds. At 155, I think the playing field might even up a little bit. We'll see. If we get to see it, but I do think that could even up the playing field a little bit, because we're talking about a Max Holloway that went from 155 pounds back to 145 pounds to then accept the fight with Topuria for the title. So I don't know, man. I do think it's an intriguing fight. Let me know in the comments below what you think. But last but not least, to get into this, actually, there's one more thing I got to talk about before I get out of here. But Dustin Poirier, honestly, I don't know how he wasn't bawling his eyes out in the middle of the cage during that whole send-off presentation they gave him. Max Holloway was an absolute class act, going to Poirier, saying, hey, it's not my time to talk. This is all I'm going to say. I got some problems with some people at 155 pounds. This man, it's his time to talk. And they went to the Poirier interview where DC was interviewing Poirier in the middle of the octagon, and Max didn't he thought the crowd should be cheering a little bit more. He came back and got the crowd hyped up for Dustin. Just, again, absolute class act Max Holloway was on Saturday night. And, they said it a million times if you watch the broadcast. I'm pretty much just ripping from that. But, you couldn't pick a better dance partner for that, right? Max Holloway and Dustin Poirier. And I think Max said it best, that he absolutely just respected Dustin on another level for saying, hey, that's the guy I want to go out and fight in my last fight, after being up 2-0 on the guy. Poirier was up 2-0 on Max, so, there was no need to run that back. But we knew what we were going to get out of this fight. Both guys knew what we were going to get out of this fight, and it was awesome to see these two go in there, go at it, and have another absolute all-time classic fight that we can go back and watch. The only thing I will say that I did not like is when Poirier came out of the cage and John Anik, had some ad for Bud Light that he was reading off, and my brain didn't put it together at first. But then you just see some random dude, like a production team guy, come out of nowhere with a Bud Light hat, crack a Bud Light, and put it in Dustin's hand. It was like, really? And I get it. On advertising, people are going to pay to have their advertisement everywhere. But as my man is walking out of the cage for the last time, he becomes a walking ad? That's kind of insane. I did not like that. That was the only part of this I did not like. Then he had all of his ATT teammates. Kayla Harrison, Joanna Young Jacek was there. Chan Sung Jung, Korean Zombie, was there to greet him. It was beautiful. It was beautiful to watch. We don't get to see our MMA legends go out like this hardly ever. And to see it acknowledged by the UFC, the fact that they went to New Orleans just for Dustin Poirier, you couldn't write this better. It was absolutely terrific. And as a hardcore MMA fan, it was just beautiful to see. I think we can all agree on it. And, like they said a couple of times on the broadcast after the fight, is that, hey, Dustin Poirier is rewriting what it is to retire in MMA. And, I mean, more guys should go this route, and I get it. You don't want to give up the fight, the life of a fighter and going out there, but it's just like, when you see these moments of guys like, how Chuck Liddell went out, how Shogun, Rashad Evans, Anderson Silva, a lot of these guys that go out and they, go out looking at the lights, essentially, and it's not fun. It sucks as an MMA fan, especially when it's your guy. And this was awesome to see. This was awesome production from the UFC. It was just, one word sums it all up. It was awesome. So shout out to Dustin Poirier. Thank you for all the memories and, everything that he accomplished in his career. It was an awesome career to witness from start to finish. As I might be showing my age a little bit right there, but yeah, watching this guy go from his first fight in the UFC to his very last, it was very rewarding as a fan to watch Dustin Poirier over the last 10 years or so. So, one last thing on the docket. Shout out to EDJ. He's not here, but he did want me to bring this up because he forgot to mention it last week. The Adam Frazier was acquired by the Royals in the All-Star break. Right here to show you. Kansas City sent minor league infielder Cam Devaney to Pittsburgh. Frazier, who was 33, has played 78 games, split between second base, left field, and right field, hitting .255, 21 ribbies for Pittsburgh this season. Actually spent last season in Kansas City and after bouncing around the majors, but now he joins the Royals, and that happened over the All-Star break. So I did want to mention that just for EDJ. Other than that, it's really been a pretty pitiful weekend in Missouri for baseball. The Royals do win on Sunday over the Marlins, excuse me. And let me pull up real quick and see. The Cardinals lose again. So the Cardinals get swept over the weekend by the Diamondbacks. All hope is lost again for the Cardinals in my mind, at least over this weekend. We'll see where it goes. But I do kind of think, same thing that I said with EDJ last week, that might be time to sell. Just go ahead and sell. See what you can do. See what you can acquire. And move on to the next couple of seasons. I mean, we already see that, which EDJ just told me that apparently now they want to keep Nolan Arenado. I don't know. We will get into much more baseball, though, when EDJ returns to the podcast. I'm assuming maybe next week. I'm going to be out of town next weekend, so might not get a pod from me next Monday. But I am going to work on these phone breakdowns over the next couple of weeks. Like I said, Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy on the way. With that being said, that'll do it for me and the Papa Stronos podcast this Monday. I appreciate if you tuned in. If you're still here, hit that subscribe button for me. Like I said, I'm on the road to 500. Trying to hit that before the NFL season starts. And the Chiefs get back to playing football. We are just, 52 days now away from the Chiefs being back at Arrowhead. And I don't know what the exact count is. It's 40-something until the Chiefs play in Brazil against the Los Angeles Chargers. It always takes me a minute with the Raiders and Chargers to be like, okay, they moved. Remember, they moved. So we are not far. Training camp this week starts. Everybody is in St. Joseph at this point, getting ready for another season and getting back to that grind of the football season. Very excited about that. So if you're still here, hit that like button for me too. Obviously, you like this podcast. You like hearing me talk about this, and just trying to build a community over here on YouTube, talking sports. I really do appreciate all the support over the last few weeks with the film breakdowns, especially. We have seen some really cool growth from around I think it was at 310, 315 subscribers, up to 354 at the moment as of recording. So like I said, I got more to come. Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice is next. Let me know in the comments below who you want to see, what you want to hear me talk about. And until next time, we work on the shows out.